Have you ever felt that cold pit in your stomach when a security officer singles you out? Now imagine you aren't just a passenger. You own the airline, but the officer staring you down? He doesn't know that yet. In today's story, we're going to JFK International, where a power-tripping TSA agent named Derek made the biggest mistake of his career. He profiled a young black woman, mocked her, and actually ripped up her passport right in front of everyone. He thought he was teaching her a lesson. He didn't realize he was destroying government property belonging to Maya Sterling, the newly appointed CEO of the very airline he services. What happens next isn't just justice. It is total, systematic destruction. Buckle up. You are not ready for this karma. The fluorescent lights of JFK International Airport, Terminal 4, hummed with a low, headache-inducing vibration that only seasoned travelers seemed to notice. For Maya Sterling, that sound was usually the backdrop to VIP lounges and private tarmac transfers. But not today. Today, Maya was running a, quote, ghost audit. At 32 years old, Maya Sterling was an anomaly in the aviation world. She was a black woman in a sea of gray-haired men, recently appointed as the CEO of Horizon Air after a ruthless corporate shakeup. The media called her the Iron Lotus, beautiful, resilient, and terrifyingly sharp. But inside the boardroom, whispers suggested she was out of touch with the ground-level operations. To prove them wrong, she had ditched the private jet. She swapped her tailored Armani suit for a pair of high-end Lululemon leggings, an oversized beige hoodie, and beat-up sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore zero makeup. She looked like a tired college student or an exhausted young mother, not the woman who signed checks worth millions. She stood in the agonizingly long TSA security line, clutching her carry-on and her passport. She wanted to see what her customers saw. She wanted to feel the frustration of the 3-hour delays she saw on spreadsheets. "Next!" a voice bellowed, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Maya shuffled forward. The line was moving sluggishly, bottlenecked by a single security podium. Manning that podium was a man whose name tag read D. Brock. Derek Brock was a man who wore his uniform a little too tight, as if trying to physically contain a swelling ego. He was in his mid-40s, with a buzz cut that had long since grown out of regulation, and a face that permanently settled into a sneer. He didn't just check IDs, he interrogated people with his eyes. He was the type of officer who thrived on the tiny, pathetic amount of power the federal government gave him. Maya watched him as she approached. She saw him smile at a young blonde woman and wave her through without barely looking at her ID. Then, she saw him stomp a Hispanic family, making them unpack every single bag because a toddler had a juice box. Maya's jaw tightened. Efficiency rating, F, she mentally noted. Customer service, non-existent. "Let's go, let's go! I don't have all day, people!" Brock shouted, slapping his gloved hand on the podium. Maya stepped up to the yellow line. She handed him her passport and her boarding pass. Her boarding pass was for seat 1A first class, but given her attire, it looked like an upgrade glitch. Brock didn't look at her. He grabbed the passport, his scanner beeped, and he stared at the screen. Then, he slowly looked up. He looked at her hoodie. He looked at her sneakers. Finally, he looked at her face. "First class?" Brock scoffed, a wet, derisive sound. "Heading to a party, sweetheart?" Maya kept her voice neutral. "Just heading home to Chicago, officer." Brock narrowed his eyes. He flipped the passport open to the photo page. It was a valid U.S. passport, but it was well-traveled. The pages were filled with stamps from Tokyo, Dubai, London, and Singapore, vestiges of her previous life as a global consultant. "You travel a lot," Brock said, suspicion dripping from his voice. "How does a girl like you afford all these stamps?" Maya blinked. The phrase, "a girl like you," hung in the air, heavy and loaded. "I work hard," Maya said, her tone cooling by a few degrees. "Is there a problem with my documentation?" Brock leaned forward. His breath smelled like stale coffee and peppermint gum. "That depends. You see, we've been getting a lot of fraudulent documents lately. High-quality fakes. People trying to sneak into places they don't belong. I assure you, Officer Brock, Maya said, reading his name tag intentionally, I belong exactly where I'm going. He didn't like that. He didn't like that she used his name. He didn't like that she wasn't looking down at her shoes. Step aside, Brock commanded, pointing to a glass partition that separated the suspects from the travelers. Excuse me? I said step aside, he shouted, causing the passengers behind her to jump. We need to verify this ID. It doesn't look right. The lamination is peeling. It wasn't. It was pristine. Maya took a deep breath. She could have pulled the "Do you know who I am" card right there. She could have called the airport authority, but she needed to see how far this rot went. She needed to see the full extent of the failure. She stepped out of line. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Maya stood in the penalty box, a small, cordoned-off area of the security checkpoint, while travelers streamed past her. They gave her looks of pity or suspicion. She checked her watch. Her flight, Horizon Air 442, was boarding in 40 minutes. Officer Brock was taking his time. He was chatting with a colleague, a younger officer named Sarah, who looked uncomfortable. Brock was holding Maya's passport, waving it around as he told a joke, using her government-issued identification as a prop. Maya's patience, usually a reservoir of corporate discipline, was evaporating. She walked back toward the podium. "Officer Brock," she called out. Brock ignored her. "Officer Brock," she said, louder this time. "I have a flight to catch. You've been holding my passport for 20 minutes without scanning it or calling a supervisor. What is the delay?" Brock turned slowly, his face reddening. He hated being interrupted. He walked over to the glass partition, towering over her. "You are in a federal security zone, ma'am. You will speak when spoken to." "I am a passenger with a valid ticket and valid identification," Maya said, her voice sharp and authoritative, the voice that silenced boardrooms. "You are profiling me." "There is nothing wrong with that passport. Scan it or call your supervisor." The air around the checkpoint grew still. The line behind them stopped moving. People were watching. Someone pulled out a phone to record. Brock saw the phone. Instead of backing down, he puffed up. He felt challenged. In his mind, he was the first line of defense for America, and this hood rat in sweatpants was trying to undermine his authority. "You think you're smart?" Brock sneered. "You think because you got a lucky upgrade you can talk down to me?" "It wasn't an upgrade," Maya said calmly. "I bought the ticket." "Bullshit," Brock spat. "This passport? It's fake. I know a fake when I see one. The stitching is off. The hologram doesn't catch the light right." "It was issued by the State Department 6 months ago," Maya replied. "Scan it." "I don't have to scan garbage," Brock yelled. The younger officer, Sarah, stepped forward timidly. "Derek, maybe just run it through the UV light? It looks okay to me." "Shut up, Jenkins!" Brock snapped at her. "I've been doing this 15 years. I know what a drug mule looks like. I know what a scammer looks like." He turned his vitriol back to Maya. "You think you're getting on that plane? You're not going anywhere." Maya's eyes went cold. "You are making a mistake that will cost you more than your job." Brock laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "Is that a threat? Are you threatening a federal officer?" "I am stating a fact." Brock's face contorted. He looked at the passport in his hand. He looked at Maya. He needed to win. He needed to show the crowd who was in charge. He needed to prove that this piece of paper held no power over him. He gripped the passport with both hands. "It's void," Brock said. "Confiscated." "Don't you dare," Maya whispered. The sound was distinct. It was a sharp, sickening CRRR rip that echoed through the quiet checkpoint. Gasps erupted from the line. The person recording with their phone let out a "whoa." Brock had torn the cover off the passport. He didn't stop there. With a manic sort of energy, he ripped the data page, the page containing Maya's photo and the scannable chip, nearly in half. He crumpled the stiff paper in his fist and tossed the pieces onto the metal table like trash. "There," Brock declared, dusting his hands off on his pants. "Now it's garbage." "Step out of the secure area, ma'am. You're not flying today." For a solid 5 seconds, no one moved. Maya looked at the mangled remains of her citizenship. Destroying a passport wasn't just rude. It was a federal crime. It was destruction of government property. It was a violation of her civil rights. But more than that, it was the ultimate act of disrespect. Maya didn't scream. She didn't lunge at him. A strange, icy calm settled over her. This was the calm she felt before a hostile takeover. This was the calm she felt before firing a redundant executive. She slowly reached into her hoodie pocket. "Phone!" Brock yelled, his hand dropping to the taser on his belt. "Put the phone away!" "I am not calling anyone," Maya said, her voice terrifyingly steady. "I am retrieving my secondary ID." She pulled out a slim black leather wallet. She didn't open it immediately. She looked at Brock, memorizing his face, his badge number, the way sweat was beading on his upper lip as he realized he might have gone too far for the audience. "You just destroyed United States government property," Maya said. "It was a fake." Brock doubled down, though his voice wavered slightly. "I have discretion to destroy fraudulent documents to prevent their reuse." "Officer Jenkins," Maya said, shifting her gaze to the terrified younger woman. "You witnessed this. You saw him destroy it without scanning it, correct?" Sarah Jenkins looked at Brock, then at Maya. She swallowed hard. "I saw it." "Good," Maya said. She flipped open the black wallet. Inside there wasn't a driver's license. There was a heavy, metallic card. It was black with gold lettering. It was the Horizon Air Executive Clearance Card, a credential only issued to the C-suite and board of directors. Next to it was a business card that simply read, "Maya Sterling, Chief Executive Officer, Horizon Air." But she didn't show him that yet. She showed him the other card in the wallet. A global entry card, harder to fake. "You destroyed my passport," Maya said, "but you can't destroy who I am." She turned to the crowd. "Is anyone recording this?" "I got it all, miss," a teenager in a Knicks jersey shouted, holding his phone high. "I'm live on TikTok right now. 20,000 people just watched him rip that up." Brock's face went pale. 20,000 people. "You need to leave," Brock stammered. "Police! I need airport police at checkpoint 4. Hostile passenger." "I'm not hostile," Maya said, leaning against the glass, crossing her arms. "And I'm not leaving. I'm waiting for the police, because I'd like to press charges." "You can't press charges against me," Brock shouted, spittle flying. "I am the law here." "We'll see," Maya said. She tapped her Apple Watch. "Siri, call Elias Thorne." Brock froze. He didn't know who Elias Thorne was, but he knew the tone of voice used to say the name. It was the tone of voice that meant nuclear option. Elias Thorne was not just a lawyer. He was the chief legal officer for Horizon Air, and arguably one of the most vicious litigators in New York City. Maya raised her wrist to her mouth. "Elias? It's Maya. I'm at JFK Terminal 4. I need you to come down here and bring the Port Authority chief. Yes, right now. An agent just destroyed my passport." "No, I'm serious. Yes, he's still standing right in front of me." She looked Brock dead in the eye as she finished the sentence. "He thinks I'm a fake." The arrival of the Port Authority police was not the cavalry rescue the other passengers might have expected. It was a noisy, chaotic reinforcement of the status quo. 2 officers arrived first, pushing through the crowd that had gathered, drawn by the scent of conflict and the viral energy radiating from the teenager's TikTok stream. The first officer, Officer Davies, was a towering man with a perpetually exhausted expression. The second, Officer Ramirez, was younger, sharper, and immediately scanned the area for threats. "All right, break it up. Step back. What is going on here?" Davies boomed. Derek Brock immediately stepped away from the glass partition, adopting the posture of a beleaguered victim. He pointed an accusatory finger at Maya, who remained leaning against the glass, her calm demeanor now a weapon in itself. "Thank God you're here," Brock panted, injecting a tremor into his voice that hadn't been there moments ago. "We have a code Bravo, hostile individual." She refused a standard security check, presented clearly fraudulent federal documents, and then proceeded to threaten a TSA officer. "That is a lie," Maya said clearly. Her voice cut through the noise, not loud, but resonant. "She said she was going to get me fired!" Brock yelled, looking at Davies for support. "She said she knows people! She's disrupting federal operations. Look at this line! It's backed up to the door because of her!" Davies turned his tired eyes onto Maya. He saw the hoodie, the messy hair, the defiant posture. He didn't see a CEO. He saw a problem that was making his shift longer. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the secure zone and come with us," Davies said, his hand resting near his cuffs. "I am waiting for my counsel," Maya stated. "And I am waiting for a supervisor to document the destruction of my passport by this man." She pointed at the mangled pieces of official documentation still sitting on the metal table. Ramirez stepped closer to look at the debris. "Derek, did you rip that?" "It's fake, Ramirez!" Brock snapped defensively. "Per TSA guidelines subsection 4B, I have discretion to decommission fraudulent documents to prevent reuse in human trafficking or terrorism schemes. She fits the profile." Fits the profile. The words hung heavy in the recycled terminal air. Maya's eyes narrowed into slits. "Officer," Maya said to Ramirez, ignoring Brock entirely, "if you arrest me based on his fabrication, you will be named as a co-defendant in the civil rights lawsuit that is already being drafted." Davies had heard enough. He didn't like being threatened by passengers in sweatpants. "All right, that's enough. You're coming with us for disorderly conduct and interfering with a federal screening process. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Maya hesitated for a microsecond. The indignity of it burned fiercely in her chest. But she knew that resisting physically would only give Brock the footage he desperately wanted. She needed to play the long game. Slowly, deliberately, she turned around. She felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click tight against her wrists. The metal bit into her skin. A ripple went through the watching crowd. The TikTok kid was narrating furiously. "They're cuffing her! Yo, they are cuffing her for nothing! Brock just lied to the cops and they bought it! Get that phone out of here!" Davies barked at the crowd. They led Maya away. It was a walk of shame designed to break the spirit. They paraded her past the long line of travelers, past the Hudson newsstand, past the entrance to the Delta Sky Club, a lounge she had executive access to. People stared. Some filmed. Some shook their heads in disgust at her, assuming she must have done something terrible. Others, mostly people of color who recognized the dynamic at play, looked on with grim sympathy. Brock watched her go, a triumphant, ugly smirk plastered across his face. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He had won. He had put the uppity traveler in her place. He turned to Sarah Jenkins, the young officer who was shaking slightly. "See, Jenkins," Brock said, puffing out his chest. "You gotta be firm. You let them give an inch, they take a mile. She'll think twice next time she tries to sneak past D. Brock." Sarah just looked at the floor, sick to her stomach. Maya was taken down a service corridor, away from the gleaming duty-free shops and into the bowels of the airport. The walls changed from polished white to scuffed beige concrete. The air smelled of jet fuel, floor wax, and stale coffee. They brought her to a holding room used by airport security and the TSA. It was a dismal, windowless box with fluorescent lights that buzzed aggressively. There was a metal bench bolted to the floor, a two-way mirror on one wall, and a steel table. They sat her on the bench, but left the cuffs on. "Your lawyer can meet you here," Davies said gruffly, closing the heavy door behind them. The lock clicked with a sound of finality. Maya sat alone in the buzzing silence. The cuffs were uncomfortable, her shoulders ached. She closed her eyes and took deep, centering breaths, the kind she used before announcing massive layoffs or facing a hostile shareholders meeting. She visualized the organizational chart of Horizon Air. She visualized the organizational chart of the Department of Homeland Security, which oversaw the TSA. She began moving mental chess pieces. 20 minutes passed. The door opened, and Brock swaggered in, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. He wasn't supposed to be there. It was against protocol. But Davies was on a smoke break, and Brock wanted to gloat. He leaned against the doorframe, sipping his coffee loudly. "So," Brock began, his tone oozing false sympathy, "bet you wish you'd just answered my questions nicely back at the podium, huh? Saved yourself a trip to the dungeon." Maya opened her eyes and looked through him. "You are trespassing in a police holding area, Mr. Brock." "It's Officer Brock," he corrected sharply. "And I can go wherever I want in this airport. I own this terminal." He took another step closer, invading her personal space. "You know, I see girls like you all the time. Think you're special because you got a little money, maybe a sugar daddy flying you places. You forget who's really in charge." "You have no idea what you've done today," Maya said quietly. Brock laughed. "What I've done is secure the airways. What you've done is earn yourself a criminal record. I'm going to write this report up so tight, you won't be able to fly Greyhound, let alone first class. Your little lawyer friend better be good." He finished his coffee and crushed the cup in his hand, tossing it into the corner instead of the trash bin. "Enjoy the accommodation, sweetheart. I'm off to catch some real bad guys." He turned to leave, his ego swollen to bursting point. He had just put his hand on the doorknob when the heavy steel door swung open from the outside with profound force, nearly knocking Brock off balance. Standing in the doorway was not a tired public defender. Standing in the doorway was Elias Thorne, and he had brought an army. Elias Thorne did not look like a lawyer. He looked like a weapon forged in a boardroom. He was a man in his late 50s, impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than Brock's car. He carried a slim leather attaché case and wore an expression of profound, icy disdain. Behind him stood Officer Davies, looking significantly paler than before. Behind Davies was a man in a white shirt with gold bars on the collar, the Port Authority police lieutenant. And behind him was a sweating, portly man in an ill-fitting suit, the TSA Federal Security Director for JFK, the man in charge of every screener in the airport. Elias Thorne didn't even look at Brock. He looked past him, at Maya, sitting handcuffed on the bench. His eyes tightened for a fraction of a second, the only sign of fury he allowed himself to show. "Get those things off her," Elias said. His voice was low, smooth, and absolutely terrifying. It wasn't a request. It was an inevitable reality. Officer Davies rushed forward, fumbling with his keys. "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir. Sorry about the mix-up." The cuffs clicked open. Maya rubbed her wrists, her expression unchanged. She didn't thank Davies. She stood up, stretching her shoulders, instantly regaining her stature. Despite the hoodie, she suddenly seemed to be the tallest person in the room. Brock, recovering from his initial shock, tried to regain control of the narrative. "Hey, wait a minute. Who are you? You can't just barge in here and order police around." "This woman is a suspect in a federal—" Elias turned his head slowly and looked at Brock. It was the look a lion gives a buzzing fly before swatting it. "Silence," Elias said. The word was barely whispered, but it sucked the air out of the room. Brock's mouth snapped shut. Elias turned his attention to the TSA Federal Security Director, a man named Henderson, who looked like he was about to have a cardiac event. "Director Henderson," Elias said smoothly, "do your officers make a habit of unlawfully detaining Fortune 500 CEOs based on racial profiling? Or is Officer Brock here just an overachieving freelancer?" Henderson wiped sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. "CEO? I don't understand, Mr. Thorne." "We were told she was a disruptive passenger with fraudulent documents." Elias walked over to the metal table. He placed his attaché case down and clicked the golden latches open. He didn't pull out papers. He pulled out an iPad. He tapped the screen a few times and turned it around to face Henderson and the police lieutenant. The screen displayed the official corporate governance profile of Horizon Air International, publicly traded on the NYSE. At the top of the profile was a high-resolution professional headshot. It was a photo of a stunning black woman in a power suit, with her hair done perfectly. The name underneath read, Maya Sterling, Chief Executive Officer and Chairwoman of the Board. Henderson looked at the iPad. Then he looked at Maya in her hoodie. Then, back at the iPad. The color drained from his face so fast it was visible. "Oh my God," Henderson whispered. Elias swiped the screen. The next image was a high-resolution scan of Maya's passport, the one that currently lay in pieces upstairs. This is a digitally verified copy of Miss Sterling's passport, held on file by our corporate legal department, Elias said coldly. Issued 6 months ago, perfectly valid. Used last week for travel to the G20 summit in Geneva. He turned to Brock, whose sneer had collapsed into a mask of abject horror. Officer Brock, Elias said, his voice dripping with venomous politeness. You stated, on a live stream currently being viewed by, last I checked, 45,000 people, that you could spot a fake. You also called the CEO of the airline that accounts for 30% of this terminal's traffic a girl like you, and suggested she was a prostitute. Brock started to shake. I didn't know she was wearing a hoodie. She looked like a black woman, Maya interrupted, stepping forward. Her voice was ice. And to you, that meant I didn't belong in first class. To you, that meant my citizenship was up for debate. To you, that meant you could destroy my property and lock me in a cage. Brock looked around desperately for allies. The police officers were staring at the floor. His own boss, Director Henderson, was looking at Maya with terrified, pleading eyes. Director Henderson, Maya said, taking command of the room. I am currently missing my flight on my airline. This is unacceptable. Absolutely, Ms. Sterling. Absolutely, Henderson stammered. We can get you on the next flight. We'll expedite. No, Maya said. I don't want a flight right now. I want a conference room. I want it now, and I want him there. She pointed a finger directly at Brock. And I want the torn pieces of my passport brought to me in an evidence bag. Of course, Henderson said, practically bowing. Whatever you need. We can use the TSA main conference room upstairs. No, Maya replied, heading for the door. We will use the Horizon Air first-class flagship lounge, my turf. She walked out of the holding cell, Elias flanking her like a Praetorian guard. The police lieutenant and Director Henderson scrambled to follow. 2 other officers grabbed Brock by the arms. Am I under arrest? Brock whimpered, confused by the sudden shift in gravity. Not yet, the lieutenant grumbled. But you're definitely in a world of hurt, buddy. Move. The transition from the claustrophobic, urine-scented holding cell to the Horizon Air first-class flagship lounge was a sensory shock that seemed to physically stagger Derek Brock. He was marched out of the bowels of the airport, flanked by the very police officers he thought were his brothers in arms, and escorted into an elevator that required a biometric scan to open. When the doors slid apart on the upper level, the world changed. The flagship lounge was a sanctuary of silence and wealth. The floor was paved in imported Italian marble that clicked softly under the heels of the flight attendants. The air was cool and smelled of white tea and expensive leather. Jazz played at a volume so low, it was almost subliminal. Through the floor-to-ceiling soundproof glass, the chaotic ballet of the tarmac, the fuel trucks, the baggage carts, the roaring engines performed in absolute silence. Brock felt small here. In the security line, standing on his rubber mat, barking orders, he felt like a king. Here, surrounded by passengers sipping Bollinger champagne and reading the Financial Times, he looked exactly like what he was, a petty bureaucrat in a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too tight. They didn't stop in the main lounge. Elias Thorne, walking with the predatory grace of a panther, led the procession to the boardroom suite, a private, glass-walled conference room reserved for VVIPs and heads of state. Maya Sterling was already there. She sat at the head of a massive table hewn from a single slab of black walnut. Behind her, the panoramic window framed the nose of a massive Boeing 787 Dreamliner, painted in the Horizon Air livery. It looked like a beast guarding its mistress. Maya hadn't changed clothes. She was still in the beige hoodie and leggings. But the context had shifted so violently that the clothes no longer looked casual. Now they looked like an eccentricity of power. She looked like a billionaire who didn't need to dress up to destroy someone. Sit, Maya said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Brock slumped into one of the Eames leather chairs at the far end of the table. To his left sat Director Henderson, his boss, who was currently sweating through his dress shirt. To his right stood the police lieutenant, arms crossed, looking at the wall to avoid eye contact. Elias Thorne took the seat to Maya's right. He placed his iPad on the table, aligned perfectly with the edge. But the focal point of the room wasn't the people. It was the object sitting in the exact center of the black table. Inside, a clear, sterile police evidence bag lay the mutilated remains of Maya Sterling's passport. The blue cover was torn in half. The data page was crumpled into a jagged ball. It looked like a dead bird. The silence in the room stretched for 10 seconds, 20, 30. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that made Brock's ears ring. He cleared his throat, desperate to break the tension. "Look," Brock started, his voice cracking slightly. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. If I had known who you were—" "Stop," Elias Thorne said. The word was like a whip crack. Elias tapped his iPad. The room's lighting dimmed slightly, and a large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It displayed a line graph that was plummeting downward in a steep, red, jagged line. "Mr. Brock," Elias began, his tone conversational but deadly, "do you know what this is?" Brock shook his head dumbly. "This is the intraday trading volume and stock price of Horizon Air," Elias explained. "At 10:15 a.m., when you decided to perform your little piece of theater at the security checkpoint, our stock was trading at $44.10. It is now 11:30 a.m. The stock is at $42.05. We have lost nearly $200 million in market capitalization in 75 minutes." Brock's mouth fell open. "I don't control the stock market." "You do when you become a global trending topic," Elias countered, swiping the screen. The graph was replaced by a collage of tweets, TikTok videos, and Instagram stories. The hashtag Horizon Hate Crime was plastered across the screen in bold letters. One video, the one taken by the kid in the Knicks jersey, had a view count that was ticking up so fast the numbers were blurring. 3.2 million, 3.3 million. The narrative is set. Elias said, cold, reading from the screen. Power-tripping TSA agent destroys black CEO's passport. Racism at JFK. Boycott Horizon until they fix security. You didn't just insult a passenger, Mr. Brock. You attacked a brand. You damaged the fiduciary value of a Fortune 500 company. Maya finally moved. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, interlacing her fingers. She looked at Brock not with anger, but with a clinical curiosity, as if he were a virus under a microscope. "I'm not interested in the stock price, Elias," Maya said softly. "I can fix the stock price. I want to talk about the girl like you." Brock flinched. "That's what you said?" Maya continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "You looked at my face, you looked at my hair, and you looked at my clothes. And you decided that I couldn't possibly be a first-class passenger. You decided I couldn't possibly be a successful executive. You decided my passport, a document issued by the United States Department of State, had to be fake, because in your world, a girl like me doesn't get to have those things." "It was a security assessment," Brock blurted out, trying to find his old bluster. "We are trained to look for anomalies. A hoodie in the first-class line is an anomaly. I was doing my job to protect this airport." "Is that right?" Maya asked. She nodded to Elias. Elias played a video clip on the screen. It was security footage from 20 minutes before Maya arrived. It showed a young white man in pajama pants and flip-flops, looking hungover, handing Brock a boarding pass. Brock laughed, high-fived the guy, and waved him through without even asking him to take off his sunglasses. "That passenger," Elias narrated, "was in seat 2B. Right behind Miss Sterling. You didn't check his ID, you didn't check his bag, you high-fived him." Brock went pale. "So," Maya said, her voice dropping an octave, "it wasn't the clothes. It wasn't the anomaly. It was me. You wanted to humble me. You saw a black woman standing tall, and you wanted to bring her down to the floor. You wanted to remind me that you had the badge, and I had nothing." She pointed a manicured finger at the plastic bag on the table. "You tore that passport because you thought it gave you power over me. You thought if I destroy this, she is nobody. You were wrong. Brock looked at Director Henderson, pleading with his eyes. Director, please, tell them, we have discretion. If a document looks fraudulent. Henderson, who had been shrinking into his chair, suddenly sat up straight, distancing himself physically from Brock. The protocol, Henderson said, his voice shaking but loud, is to use the UV scanner, then the magnifiers, then call a supervisor. Subsection 4, paragraph C of the screener's handbook explicitly forbids the physical alteration or destruction of any travel document by a Level 1 officer. You went rogue, Derek. You violated every procedure we have. Don't drag me into this. The betrayal hit Brock like a physical blow. He was alone. We are prepared to offer a settlement, Henderson said quickly to Maya, ignoring Brock. TSA will terminate Officer Brock immediately. We will issue a press release stating he acted alone. We will expedite your new documentation. We just want to put this behind us. Maya looked at Henderson, then back at the terrified man in the cheap suit. Terminate him? Maya asked. That's it? You think this ends with him filing for unemployment? She stood up. She walked to the window, looking out at the massive jet engine of her plane. Elias, please explain the legal reality of what sits on this table. Elias Thorne stood up. He didn't look at a screen. He recited the law from memory, his voice filling the room like a verdict. 18 U.S. Code, Section 1361, willful depredation against any property of the United States. A passport is government property. The penalty is up to 10 years in federal prison. 18 U.S. Code, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. You used your official authority to violate Ms. Sterling's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable seizure. That carries another 10 years. Elias leaned over the table, bringing his face inches from Brock's. And since you did this to the CEO of an airline at a secure federal checkpoint, disrupting interstate commerce, we are looking at enhanced sentencing guidelines. We aren't just getting you fired, Derek. We are looking to put you in a cage until your grandchildren are in high school. The air left the room. Brock began to shake uncontrollably. The reality of it, the cold, hard, legal reality, finally pierced his ego. He wasn't the hero. He wasn't the guardian of the gate. He was a criminal who had just confessed on camera to millions of people. No, Brock whispered. No, you can't. I have a mortgage. My daughter. She's looking at colleges next year. I have 20 years in the service. I'm a good guy. Tears began to stream down his face, tracking through the stubble on his cheeks. He looked at Maya, his hands clasped together in a begging motion. Miss Sterling, please! I'm begging you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was having a bad day. I just snapped. Don't ruin my life over a piece of paper, please. Just let them fire me. Don't send me to jail. Maya turned from the window. She walked slowly back to the table and looked down at the sobbing man. For a moment, her expression softened, and Brock felt a spark of hope. A bad day, Maya repeated softly. Yes, just a bad day, Brock cried. If I had been a single mother trying to get to a funeral, and you tore up my passport, Maya said, her voice hardening into diamond, my life would have been ruined. I would have missed the flight. I would have been detained. I wouldn't have had Elias Thorne to save me. I would have been another victim in your bad day. She leaned in close. You didn't stop because you realized you were wrong, Mr. Brock. You're only crying because you realized I'm powerful. You aren't sorry you did it. You're sorry you did it to me. Maya straightened up and looked at the police lieutenant. Lieutenant, you witnessed a federal officer admit to the destruction of government property. You have the evidence. You have the confession. Do your job. The lieutenant nodded grimly. He had seen enough. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. Heavy, steel cuffs, much more substantial than the ones they had used on Maya. Derek Brock, the lieutenant announced, his voice booming in the quiet lounge. Stand up. No, please, Brock wailed, clutching the arms of the leather chair. Stand up, the lieutenant barked, grabbing Brock by the shoulder and hauling him to his feet. He spun Brock around. Click, click. The sound was final. It echoed off the marble walls. You are under arrest for felony destruction of government property and official misconduct. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Brock was sobbing openly now, a messy, ugly sound. "Henderson, help me!" Director Henderson looked at his shoes, refusing to acknowledge the man he had empowered for years. The lieutenant and his partner marched Brock toward the door. As they passed the glass walls of the main lounge, the first-class passengers looked up from their laptops and wines. They saw the arrogant officer who had been terrorizing the checkpoint line, now shuffling in cuffs, weeping, broken. Someone in the lounge slowly started to clap. Then another. Then another. Maya watched him disappear into the elevator. She didn't clap. She just let out a long, slow breath, releasing the tension she had carried since she stepped onto the security mat. She turned to Elias. "Is the press release ready?" "Drafted and ready to send," Elias said, closing his iPad. "Do you want to review it?" "No," Maya said. She picked up her purse. "Send it. Then, get me a new passport. I have a board meeting in Tokyo in 14 hours, and I'm done waiting in line." She looked at the empty chair where Brock had sat. "Let's go, Elias. We have an airline to run." The silence aboard the Horizon Air Gulfstream G650 was a stark, jarring contrast to the cacophony Maya had left behind at JFK. At 45,000 feet, the air was still and cool, scented with the faint leather of the cabin seats and the fresh orchids sitting on the side table. Maya sat by the window, staring out at the darkening clouds over Pennsylvania. She held a glass of sparkling water, the bubbles rising in a frantic rush, much like the thoughts racing through her mind. Across from her, Elias Thorne was in full war room mode. He wasn't relaxing. He had 3 phones laid out on the burl wood table, and the glow of his laptop illuminated his sharp features. "The video has breached 10 million views across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram," Elias said, his voice cutting through the hum of the engines. "It's trending globally. Hashtag Horizon Hate Crime is the #1 topic in the United States, keeping the NFL playoffs off the top spot." "That never happens." Maya turned from the window. "What is the sentiment?" "Overwhelmingly on your side," Elias reported, scrolling through a data stream, "but it's aggressive. People aren't just mad. They are hunting." Internet sleuths found Derek Brock's Facebook page within 20 minutes of the video going live. They found his high school yearbook photo. They found his address. The Port Authority had to station a patrol car outside his house in Queens to prevent a riot. Maya set her glass down. "I don't want a mob, Elias. I want justice. There is a difference." "The mob creates the pressure," Elias said, looking up with a predator's grin. "The pressure forces the district attorney to stop dragging his feet. The U.S. attorney for the Southern District has already called me twice. They aren't going to offer him a plea deal for a slap on the wrist, not with 10 million witnesses demanding blood." The next morning, the atmosphere outside Horizon Air's Chicago headquarters felt less like a business district and more like a besieged fortress. Satellite trucks from every major news network lined the streets. The paparazzi were jockeying for position. Maya prepared in her private suite on the 40th floor. She rejected the stylist's suggestion of a soft, approachable blue dress. Instead, she chose armor, a razor-sharp, crimson Alexander McQueen power suit. It was the color of alarm, of power, and of blood. When she walked out to the podium in the marble lobby, the camera flashes were blinding, a strobe light effect that lasted for nearly 30 seconds. Maya stood stoic, waiting for the silence. When it finally came, it was heavy. "Yesterday," Maya began, her voice amplified and steady, broadcast live into millions of living rooms, "I was reminded of a painful truth. I was reminded that for many, no matter how hard you work, no matter the title on your business card, you can still be reduced to a stereotype in the blink of an eye." She looked directly into the lens of the center camera. An agent of the federal government, a man sworn to protect the traveling public, used his badge as a shield to inflict humiliation. He looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong. He destroyed my passport, the property of the United States government, because his ego could not accept that a black woman in a hoodie could be his superior. A murmur went through the press corps. "Let me be clear," Maya continued, her voice hardening. "This was not a customer service dispute. This was a violation of civil rights. Officer Derek Brock has been terminated, but that is not where this ends. Horizon Air is filing a civil suit against him personally for damages. Furthermore, we are cooperating fully with the Department of Justice, which has informed me this morning that Mr. Brock is being charged with 2 federal felonies." She paused, letting the weight of the word felonies hang in the air. To every traveler who has ever felt small while standing in a security line, you deserve dignity. Horizon Air will not just fly you. We will fight for you. If they can do it to a CEO, they can do it to anyone. And as of today, that stops. The weeks that followed were a slow-motion car crash for Derek Brock. Because of the high profile of the victim, the blue wall of silence that usually protected law enforcement evaporated. The police union refused to pay for his legal defense, citing his flagrant violation of clear protocols. He was forced to hire a private criminal defense attorney, draining his life savings and forcing him to take a second mortgage on the house he was already struggling to pay for. The hard karma hit him not in a single moment, but in 1,000 small cuts. His face was everywhere. He couldn't go to the grocery store without being heckled. His wife, humiliated by the public shaming and the financial ruin he had brought upon them, took the kids to stay with her sister in Albany. He sat alone in his house, watching the news, seeing Maya Sterling's stock price rise while his life dissolved into ash. 6 months later, the final blow landed. The federal district court in Manhattan was packed. Maya did not attend. She sent Elias Thorne to represent her interests. Brock sat at the defense table, wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 30 pounds. The arrogance that had fueled him at JFK was gone, replaced by a trembling, pathetic fear. He had pleaded guilty to destruction of government property and deprivation of rights under color of law. He had hoped for probation. He had hoped the judge would see him as a hard-working man who made one mistake. Judge Elena Rossi, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for harsh sentences on public corruption, stared down at him over her spectacles. "Mr. Brock," the judge said, her voice echoing in the wood-paneled room, "you stood before this court and claimed you were just doing your job. That is a lie. Your job was to screen for threats. Instead, you became the threat. You weaponized your authority to bully a woman simply because you didn't like how she looked. You tore up a symbol of her citizenship to satisfy your own fragile ego." Brock looked down, tears dripping onto the defense table. "The public trust is a fragile thing," Judge Rossi continued, "and you shattered it on a global stage. The court needs to send a message that a badge is a responsibility, not a crown." The gavel raised. "Derek Brock, I sentence you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are hereby ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $5,000 for the property damage and legal fees. Furthermore, you are permanently barred from holding any position of employment within the local, state, or federal government of the United States." The gavel banged down. It sounded like a gunshot. Brock's knees buckled. He turned to look at the gallery, perhaps looking for his wife, but she wasn't there. Only Elias Thorne was there, watching with cold, impassive eyes. 2 U.S. Marshals stepped forward, pulling Brock's arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked. The same sound he had loved to inflict on others, now the soundtrack of his own demise. Back in Chicago, Maya Sterling sat in her corner office. The city skyline glittered outside, a sprawling grid of lights. On her desk sat the Wall Street Journal. The headline on the earnings report was positive. Horizon Air posts record profits. CEO Sterling's approval rating soars. But Maya was looking at a smaller column on page B4. Former TSA agent sentenced to prison. She read the details. The 18 months. The permanent ban. The total destruction of the career he had used to torment her. It was absolute. It was final. She didn't feel a surge of joy. She felt a quiet, solid sense of balance being restored. The universe had tipped, and she had forced it back into alignment. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out her new passport. It was crisp, the gold foil of the American eagle catching the light of her desk lamp. It was pristine. She ran her thumb over the cover, feeling the texture. It was just a booklet, just paper and ink, but it represented the one thing Derek Brock had tried to take, and the one thing she had proven he could never touch: her right to be exactly who she was, wherever she chose to go. There was a knock at the door. "Ms. Sterling," her assistant said, "the car is ready. The jet is fueled for Tokyo." Maya slipped the passport into her purse and stood up. She smoothed the lapel of her suit, checked her reflection in the glass, and saw the Iron Lotus staring back. "Let's go," Maya said. "We have a schedule to keep." 18 months in federal prison, a permanent ban from government work, his pension, his reputation, his family, gone. Derek Brock thought he was untouchable because he had a badge and a bad attitude. He thought he could bully Maya Sterling because she was wearing a hoodie, but he forgot the most important rule of life. You never really know who you're talking to. Maya didn't scream. She didn't fight him physically. She used the system that he tried to weaponize and turned it right back around on him. That is what we call hard karma. It's not just about revenge. It's about ensuring that people who abuse their power lose the privilege of having it. If you enjoyed seeing justice served ice cold, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. It helps the YouTube algorithm share this story with more people who need to see bullies get taken down. And if you want more stories like this, stories of twists, drama, and instant regret, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next video.